So it was a long time ago that this amazing work of fiction came out, and people were wondering for years and years if there was ever going to be an adaptation to TV or film. And it was discussed for years that most likely that was never going to happen because it was such a complex work of fiction, and that was Lord of the Rings. It came out and it was adapted in three films. It took out some stuff and it even gained an Oscar. People liked it. But then there was a different one. This one was a comic book. This one was a comic book, and for years and years, people wonder if it was going to get an adaptation. It was very popular. The author loved it. It was one of his most well known works. And finally, it happened. And that was Watchmen. And it received mixed reviews. Some fans love it, some fans hate it. And now we're in the year of our Lord 2022, and one of the most acclaimed graphic novels is being adapted into TV finally after several attempts. And this time I am talking about the real one, and that is The Sandman. So, as you can see, adaptation has taken a really odd turn this couple of years. Um, because we had two examples with the Lord of the Rings, and especially now Lord of the Rings, it has this series coming in Prime that apparently it has nothing to do with the books and everyone is pissed off about it. But we have Lord of the Rings and we have Watchmen, both that were so difficult, and everyone was saying that they will never be adapted or that it will be really difficult to adapt. Lord of the Rings was treated with lots of love by Peter Jackson, and he took out a lot of it because I think, if I remember correctly, the studio, I think it was New Line Cinema. If I'm wrong, correct me. Um, they wanted either one movie or two movies, and Peter Jackson was like, "This is not gonna work. If you want this to work, it has to be three movies." So again, there were lots of compromises made to adapt Lord of the Rings. And Zack Snyder, when he adapted Watchmen, he went a different route. He pretty much took all the scenes from Watchmen, like square by square, and made them into film. I remember when I read the comic book and I was like, oh, this is just like the movie. Because I saw the movie first and then I read the comic book. The comic book is better. But it's very, very similar. Um, and there's even an extended version with all the parts that he left out. Um, they're not essential to the main story of Watchmen, but they are in the comic book, so people feel like it's completion. And I think we've become very spoiled, after post MCU, with what it gets to be adapted and what doesn't. Because when it comes to something being adapted, we want it to be the same, which is not what an adaptation is. An adaptation is something that it's one form. It's a book, and it needs to take the shape. Certain things need to be changed for it to be a different medium, a film, a TV, video game, whatever. A comic book, even if it's a novel into a comic book. And now, um, fandoms, this I will discuss toxic fandoms later, but fans have become so, I don't want to say entitled, but so demanding that it needs to look just like this, and it needs to look just like that, and it needs to follow the same path that it follow on the book. And it's terrible because an adaptation should be that adapted, it should change. I'm talking about especially about Sandman, because Neil Gaiman has gone many a time, going saying that he loves his work so much that he prevented bad adaptations coming into fruition until finally, he even, I think he just recently admitted that he quite literally botched one on purpose. He was like, I just literally just went in and was like, nope, and shut it down. And now he feels that he had a lot of control over this one. And the issue with why I'm starting like this when I'm talking about the Sandman series is because there's so much drama surrounding it, and we all know what it is, and we're going to discuss it. So we'll discuss that, and then we'll discuss the series properly. So there's a lot of talk about forced inclusivity or wokeness. And when it comes to Neil Gaiman, you have to realize who he is as an author. I cannot say as a person because I don't know him, right? But as an author, Neil Gaiman has always been an extremely inclusive person. His works have always have LGBT representation, uh, people of color, like they've always had that, you know, and people coming in and saying, "Oh, I wasn't expecting there to be so much gay people in Sandman." Is like, did you actually read the comic books? It has so many characters. Like for instance, if spoilers for the first season if you haven't seen it, I think the first one will be the gay couple that has a fight in the diner. That's in the original comic book. The son, I think, in the first chapter, I think that's in the comic book. Um, what else? The only great difference here is that they didn't include Constantine. Also, I always say Constantine. I don't know why they said Constantine. I don't know if in UK they say it differently, but I've always known it as Constantine. They changed Constantine to being a woman, and I think that was a smart choice personally, because Matt Ryan, he did such a good Constantine that it would be really hard to imagine someone else on the role. And and they were like, oh, then we'll just switch it a little, because you have to realize when it comes to a character, what are their most important um aspects, what makes a character a character. And I wish I would have stayed in academia and continue studying that. What makes a character a character, the identifying properties of a character. For instance, for Constantine, yeah, it's important that he's a man, right? But if you want to make an adaptation of a variant of Constantine, what is important is that uh, they're sarcastic, that they are flirty with everyone, that they're pansexual, uh, that they are an exorcist, and they're a warlock or a witch in this case with the female version, and they have a past that they're running away from because they're trying to run away from hell. And all of that was there with Gina Coleman. Uh, and the only difference was that, well, she was a woman. But the episode pretty much ran the same way the chapter goes in the graphic novel. People were like, oh my god, I can't believe They made Constantine uh gay. It's like, do you know Constantine? Like the man has sex with the devil and demons and King Shark most recently. Like doesn't matter that they put her as a bisexual or gay woman. Like it doesn't matter if you actually know the character of Constantine. And then the other big change, like the main changes were that we had these entities, like Lucian, the librarian, and Lucifer. They were also portrayed by women. Lucian, I don't think it's a huge issue that it was portrayed by a woman, given that Lucian is a nightmare. Well, it used to be a nightmare, and then it became like the librarian. And the main work that he or she does is that they just support Dream. So I didn't see the huge issue of, oh my god, it's not the white dude that it was in the comic book. Like no, the work that the actress did as sorry, I don't have the name, as Lucien was really good. Like I really felt like, oh, it's this compassionate person trying to deal with the weariness of Dream, which is the point of Lucien. And then we come to Lucifer. One day we will discuss my obsession with the character of Lucifer. Uh, I, I really like adaptations of Lucifer in fiction because they entail very interesting things about humanity and evil. Um, evil. Uh, what to say? Uh, of why evil stuff happens in fiction. I think I've mentioned this before with the Devilman Crybaby. I think I mentioned that there. That there's a Lucifer there. If you ever see that Netflix series that I really recommend. It's horrifying, but it's a really great series. Um, but Lucifer is a very interesting character to adapt into any form of fiction. And my favorite one is the one from Sandman. And uh, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but when I found out that Fox was going to adapt the comic book of Lucifer, I was so excited. And then when I saw what it became, I was so upset. Immediately. I didn't even give it a chance because I don't hate Tom Ellis' portrayal of Lucifer. I think he's doing what he's supposed to do. But the story, the structure of Lucifer, the series, is so old. I think it's like compared to the real comic book, to compared to the Lucifer comic book, is just like so boring. I find it. I haven't seen it, but I know the premise. I don't know if it became something different afterwards. But I remember I saw the trailer back then. They were like, "Oh, he's gonna be friends with a police woman and they're gonna go solve crimes." I was like, oh fuck this. Because that's not my Lucifer. Yeah, that's not something interesting that I would watch. That is the same formula that Fox has had for years. They had it with House, they had it with Bones, they had it with Lie to Me, they had it with other different shows where they have one character who's kind of an asshole, or a misanthropic person, and then the other one who's like the heart of the duo, and then they develop chemistry and end up together and they do stuff. Sometimes they solve crimes, sometimes they help people in the hospital, sometimes yeah, like Lie to Me was also solving crimes. uh Bones was solving crimes, House was medical stuff, and Lucifer was going to be solving crimes. And I could just keep thinking, what does the devil have to do with solving crimes? He's the devil. He got away from hell to stay away from human affairs. Like, it didn't make any sense to me, and I was so upset that they reduced it to that. And yes, as I predicted, eventually I read that Lucifer and the policewoman end up together, and it was like, but I will cry my bearings about the Lucifer character another day. That's pretty much it, though. So I was very happy that they were going in a completely different direction for the Sandman with Lucifer, a more faithful one to the original in the comic book, and they went with Gwendolyn Christine as Lucifer, and I was really excited about that. People were like, "Oh, we want Tom Ellis." I can understand that, wanting the actor that did play Lucifer, but again, the Lucifer in Sandman, the it's so much different. It's so much different. It's very different, uh, because it's a more ethereal. It's an angel still, and and Gwendoline definitely has that look on her, that she looks like an angel, but she can also be very intimidating, and the androgynous thing. It's been done before. It was done with Tilda Swinton and Constantine when she was Angel Gabriel. So I think it was an excellent choice, and that was I think a great choice for Lucifer, and she was great. I loved her as Lucifer. I'm still like, yes, waiting for the other parts that I know are coming with Lucifer. And then we come to the big one, the big casting choice that everyone screamed and shouted about, and the world got angry, and all of the fiction in Sandman rumble through the earth and scream in agony, why? The casting of Dead. So, if you know anything about Sandman, is that two of the most beloved characters is Sandman himself, Morpheus, and his sister, Death, and they both have particular looks, and they have very particular looks and personalities. And the thing with Dead is that she looked like the epitome, like the most gothic girl ever. She was pale. She had like 80s hair, and she was like wearing just black clothes, and that was her. She looked like a rocker, pretty much. So everyone was dying to see that, especially when we saw Morpheus, and Tom Sturridge looks a lot like Morpheus. I would say that. And then we saw that, and she doesn't look like the one in the comic book. Just it's just on a matter of looking, is just she's a black woman. And the amount of upsettingness, it was so, like, the backlash was so strong. It didn't kill the project, of course, and people still gave it a shot and saw it, but everyone was just like, oh yeah, like, she's great, I just wish she wasn't black, which is ridiculous. Again, we have to analyze what makes a character a character. In the case of Dead, what makes Dead Dead, and what make this character of Dead so lovable, that it's one of the main representations of Dead in the media, is that usually we associate the character of Dead, the Green Reaper, however, with something scary. And the characters that represent dead are you always scary, are always like trying to comfort you and comfort you and say like, oh, they're portrayed as bad guys essentially, because dead is the end of it all. And in the Sandman, dead compared to Dream, which was kind of the funny thing about it. You had the king of dreams and nightmares, who was supposed to be is when you think about dreams, you're supposed to think that they're this wonderful, beautiful thing because you're dreaming, and he's such a downer. He's a complete downer. He's like, oh God. And in turn, his sister who's dead, the end of it all, is an extremely friendly being, and that is shown in her introduction. That she goes and picks up people with a smile, and she even says why in the chapter. She states that after years and years and years and years of doing the job, she realized, oh, these people are just afraid. They want to see a friendly face. So I became the friendly face, and she became kind instead of just like, your time's up, let's go. She became kind and understanding, and trying to realize that, yeah, she's very philosophical in that way. And that's what makes Dead a great character. And as long as that's there, yes, I understand it's frustrating that she doesn't look like your manic pixie dream of a god girl. I understand that can be frustrating for you. But again, let's remember, it's an adaptation. The main point is that the character of Dead, it's there. And it is. If you've seen already the series and the episode where Dead appears, honestly, I loved it. I really really liked it. She was perfect. Like, she and Morpheus have this brother and sister relationship, that you can tell has been going on for years. That she's like, oh, you've been sulking again, I can tell. And she's trying to motivate him, but also doing her job. And again, she's kind and smiling. That's one of the things that I always remember about Dead in this series, that she's always smiling. Not because she's no like, oh, I'm dead and I'm gonna be the end of you, so I have like a secret, like, no, like, she's smiling because she's like, this is a hard job and I have to endure it, so I try to do it with a smile. And that's how they portrayed her. I think it was perfect. Who cares if she's black? uh to focus in such a small thing of whether if she's black or not. W- Again, we're all like pro, yes, um let's give more job and more representation to black actors and LGBT actors and stuff like that. But as long as it doesn't mess with what I have in my mind of a certain character. And I'll be the one to admit, there are parts of a character that are not negotiable, but other parts can be changed and it doesn't matter. For instance, like I'm saying about Dead, the most important trait about Dead is not whether is she black, white or not, is that she's kind. As long as she's kind, it has a good relationship with with Morpheus, then that's Dead. They're doing a good adaptation of the character. Sure, she doesn't look exactly like the one in the comic book, but she's a good adaptation of what it was, the representation of the character in the comic book. So it's ridiculous to just spend and a waste of time to just spend like, oh, it's just that she's not my manic pixie goddess god dream that I wanted. Like, no. It's ridiculous in all honesty. And yeah, it's upsetting. that people are so open about, like being like, oh, it's just that Sandman wants to be very inclusive. Oh, dude, you're not ready for the next seasons. If they do the next seasons where things get more complex. If you haven't read the comic book, uh, and it's just stupid. But those are where the issues with the adaptation that came out, that people were open about, like, it's not perfect, it's not how I want it, it's not how I envision Sandman. It's like, you don't have to envision Sandman, you already have it, you have the comic book. This is an adaptation, this is a different thing, allow it to be a different thing, change some stuff to ruffle some feathers so it can be different. um and for instance, some people were saying, "Oh, it's still tokenism because the main actors for the Endless are still white. We haven't seen Delirium yet. We haven't seen Destiny yet. We haven't seen Destruction yet. So we don't know if they're gonna be um white or not." The only thing that angers me is that so far it's only been black and white people. As a Mexican, I'm like, how about putting some Latin Americans there? I'm just saying, they're entities. They can be whatever they want. Um, but all these changes they made, it's because it's an adaptation. And getting into your high horse and being like, oh, it's just that I'm entitled, or I am deserving of this because I waited 20 years to see Sandman on TV. Dude, do you know how long Neil Gaiman waited to actually properly adapt his work? Like that. Don't compare your peril to his. I waited 10 years. It's been 10 years since I read the comic books. I can't believe it's been 10 years. And now going into, I'm thinking if I should make this two separate videos because this one is already almost half an hour. I want just to talk about the story and not me complaining all about the adaptation issues that we had with Sandman. So I think I'm gonna stop this video here, talking about all the adaptation issues that it had, all the wokeism, and because just if you think that the series is too woke, then you don't know the Sandman. You don't know how everything changes. Like we just saw the episode with the cats. I was wondering how they were going to do that one. And in that one, Dream becomes a cat. Like he can become anything. So like any discussion about being like, oh, they're canonically this color, like it goes out the window when you have to consider it's an adaptation. Adaptations will always be um thankless jobs in Hollywood, I think, and in Netflix now apparently. And to to adapt Sandman is an incredible difficult job because of all the characters, all the branching stories. So I'm sure they're doing their best. You know, I haven't seen them drop the ball on this first season, but just to go into arms and saying, oh, they just don't look the way that I want them to look. Again, I think we've been pampered with the MCU, where we get people that feel just like the comic book characters, like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. You look at them and you see the the character. right? They're not exactly the same. Like Hugh Jackman is not tiny. If anything, for Robert Downey Jr., they started drawing Iron Man to look more like him. Uh, and I cannot say that much about Thor. Um, but also Jim Gordon has been a character that has gone through many changes. Like he always had gray hair, but after the Dark Knight trilogy, because Gary Oldman had brown hair, they started drawing him with brown hair. It should be, in theory, redhead because he is the dad of Barbara Gordon. But yeah, they started drawing him more like Gary Oldman. So yeah, sometimes it becomes the case that uh, uh, adaptation is so good that it becomes the canon. It can happen, you know. So all these complaints are a bit silly, I think, especially giving with characters again, like the main three ones that they change. That was Constantine, that was Lucifer, and that was Dead. They still are very much in essence the character that they're representing, and that I think is what should count. But those are the perils of adaptation for Sandman. Now let's discuss what actually happened this season. But I'll see that in another video in case you don't want to hear this whole discussion and just want to hear about the series.